Oh, hi. You know what time it is? No, not pizza time. Although, I guess any time can be pizza time, especially if you're a chunker. But no, it's collab time. I went to Vancouver to meet a few people. One of them being Kane Shen, a fellow sword enthusiast on YouTube. Link down below, of course. I've recorded several videos with him, of which this is the first, obviously. And then there will also be quite a few videos with Academy Duello. You can look forward to that. So, let's get started. Thanks for having me.
It's always a pleasure. Yeah. And I have joy for you to handle.
Yes, we can nerd out about sharp things.
Yeah.
That's always fun.
The Albion Viceroy, which we're going to cut with tomorrow at Academy Duello.
It's definitely hand and a half sword, in the sense when you hold it in one hand, this is still quite maneuverable. So I could definitely imagine, you know, like, sure, in one hand normally you would prefer an arming sword that's meant for it, but you could handle this quite easily with one hand, in fact. So let alone with two, you have plenty of control.
Right.
Yeah.
Some people came over here, they're like casual sword enthusiasts. They handle
Filthy casuals.
Yeah, filthy casual. Let them handle this one. The first impression was, it's so light. Wow, it's so light. Actually, it's one of the heavier longswords because this is not very long, 35 inches blade, and then it weighs close to 1,700 grams. But if you have
really
the impression,
I would not have guessed that.
You would not.
You know, you would think I'd be fairly decent at judging weights at this point, but no, I would have guessed like 1.5 kilos at most.
Yeah, I think that's the thing that most people ignore when you talk about the broad category of swords, and often you're generalizing like katana versus long swords, but you're not talking about the varieties, especially European longswords, medieval longswords. There's such vast...
Yeah, that's a great example. Like these two, like, they're very different.
Yeah.
Like quite a different profile.
Yeah.
It can be, of course, more extreme than that.
Right.
You can have something that's based like borderline S-talk.
Yeah. Now you're talking light. This is not really lightweight, but the tip has so much less weight than...
you can very easily control the tip and disengage and all of that. So that is really quite light. So that's... So of course a better thruster than it is cutter.
Right.
But if you cut low enough, it should still be decent.
So I've seen people discussing like they're going to the extreme from cutting oriented to thrusting oriented. Using this is pretty much thrusting oriented. And then some of the more extreme ones, they remain thick. There's one type 17 in Oakshot's book, and I got a measurement. It actually has a reverse distal taper. Normally, they will become a lot thinner, at least half as thin near the tip than the base, right? There's one that actually becomes thicker as it approaches the tip. And the point of balance is like in the middle of the blade. So you will think, well, that's got to be used in a way that point of balance doesn't really matter. So for the most part, you're supposed to just half swording in gauntlet against heavily armored opponents. The shortening of where the tip is as opposed to your hand, the pivot point, the shorter it is, the more accurate it is, and then the more rigid it is. Imagine a sword that's plenty flexible. Well, this is not really that flexible because they're always going to have some spring, right? But you're doing this, you jab into something, suddenly the force doesn't just dissipate. You know, along the entire blade, and you're forcing this to be just, you know, essentially a pry bar, like a spike to go into. So this one definitely is not dedicated for armor fighting, harness fighting. You're talking more about cutting still. So this is by the end of medieval times, early Renaissance. You can see the ricasso. This is a very good sign for development. Long swords, they just start to have ricasso. So at the base, you don't need blade that broad like this one over here, the Principe. Which we're gonna talk about. You gotta have a very large amount of profile taper and still have it broad enough, pretty much broader than this one, near the cutting portion. So the base is so broad and it gets so, the edge angle gets so small, right? Because the wider you have, the thinner you have, it gets very fragile near the edge, which is why it cuts so much better. But then if you cut into some hard material or any resistance, it gets stuck into it and then the force just keep traveling. It's gonna give. So that one took a pretty sizable chunk out of the steel, right? Is it your old?
The first bad hit that I got with it bent the edge a little, kind of rolled it, and then the second like straight up took a gouge out.
You think that, yeah, something performs well, basically trades durability for it, right? Was the first hit on a branch, like a thick branch?
Yeah, it was. There was one hit that was a really bad angle, so it just kind of glanced off, and in the process, the wood kind of bent the edge.
Right.
And then the second one was on the zombie head, and that maybe there were a couple more cuts in between that weakened it further. I don't know, but that's what did it, which is.
Yeah,
totally understandable. Like some people were reacting negatively to that and were like, "Oh, this shouldn't happen with an Albion." Now, hang on, you can. It doesn't matter how good the blade is. If you screw it up enough, you will absolutely damage it. So, and this is one of those cases. And also, that's just the downside of having such a crazy cutter. Like it tapers so much. There's just not that much material. If it's that thin, of course it's going to bend and break and who knows what on high impact.
Quite a bit of a backlash for Albion. I think that one did. People are thinking, oh, so it's not really that great. It's only for cutting grass. Cutting mat. I think we have to look at it analytically. First of all, the first cut was fair. Yeah. Like on a pole arm shaft, it's gonna happen. If you do like a kung pao to bat aside a spear, right? Like it's always gonna happen. Yeah. And it could, diminish the edge somewhat. But the second one, I think there's a lot of nuance in that because ZGB head anatomically it's not exactly accurate. Is it? Because the cheekbone, you cut in like a Zwerkow, cut into the cheekbone, that's completely solid. So, I asked Nikki, she has anatomy knowledge in med school, and she said that's supposed to be face bone supposed to be a plate. So behind that's the hollow of the skull or the inside of your mouth cavity. But the bone itself is still hollow. Again, inside's marrow, right? So it's not really like a solid, I don't know whether they use resin or cement, like it's just a block.
Yeah, I don't know exactly what it is.
Right.
But yeah, it's definitely more solid than...
Yeah. So if you get stuck in that and then a tricky angle, which happens a lot during fighting, because you can aim for it. If you're lucky to land the hit, let alone like, I'm going to do perfect edge angle like at a cutting competition.
Yeah. This is already like the ideal case scenario because you're taking your time. Right. And I mean, in this case, I was trying to make it more combat oriented by, just doing two movements instead of one and sort of just statically performing it. Yeah. But there's a lot of that can go wrong, and particularly, in a fight, adrenaline, this and that. So, you cannot expect to baby the edge. That's just not happening. Yeah. There's going to be hard impact. And also, like, when it comes to, I've said this before, but when it comes to this whole don't parry with the edge debate and everything, it's understandable. But the thing that's so easy to forget, apparently, for people is that you can't do anything about it when you defend, or when you attack, rather. Because when you cut and the other guy blocks with the edge, what are you going to do about it? And if they block low, they take their damage on the strong, where it doesn't matter as much. I mean, it can because it'll weaken the blade, so it's more likely to break at that point. But generally, it doesn't affect your offensive options with the blade. Right. So when you attack,
but
you're going
even if they block with the flat, your edge is diminished.
Yeah,
you're always going to, because if it gets blocked, which is hopefully it's 90% or 99% of the time, modern people are treating this as a property, like a car. But think about it, like, chances are you go before your sword goes. Like, how many people outlast their sword? It's possible if you are wearing armor all the time. But if you're doing something like on fairground, symmetrical warfare, like dueling someone, same armor in the same way, you can't really think too much about your sword. Sword can be fixed, it can be commissioned again. You can't really, hey, if you're gone, what good is a perfect sword?
Particularly with medieval and Renaissance medicine and treatment.
Even a laceration, like it can end you. Maybe not immediately. Yeah.
Like your blacksmith will be more able to repair the blade than the barber will fix you.
Yeah.
So yes, it is a tool, and it is supposed to take the damage so you don't. So yeah, I don't really understand how hung up some people get on the idea that a sword needs to be like indestructible or whatever, particularly when you do hard things like that, like chopping into wood. And how abusive that is another discussion, because that's also where other people have issues. But of course, like, is it really more abusive to chop into a tree limb than, into a shield?
Right.
Or even bone, depending, like,
living.
Imagine like the blade chops into someone's hip bone. That's quite a massive, hard material.
It's a whole chunk of bone, whereas ribs is easier.
Yeah. And again, with bad edge alignment, guess what? It'll be damaged.
Yeah, I think it's great that Arms Armor published a video a few days ago. It said whether swords are dispensable. And the conclusion is, rather than dispensable, it's more consumable. You diminish your sword over time like you diminish your car. Yeah. It requires maintenance. And unless it past the point, it's total. It's not even worth it to, hey, I'm gonna reheat treat it, I'm gonna shorten it, I'm gonna fix the edge, and then rehilt it. But the cost of commissioning, making a new sword is less than fixing it, right?
Yeah.
Unless it's some, value, sentimental value, ancestral swords, or, so you had to preserve it somehow.
Yeah. And it's the same with modern weapons. Like on a firearm, the guide rod can break, for example, or the recoil spring can wear out, or so many things can happen, right? Or the magazine gets damaged, or...
Exactly.
You're not just going to be like, oh, this is trash. No, you're just going to repair it.
Right.